Duane Akina's impact, the latest with Arch Manning, and some very interesting injury updates from Steve Sarkisian just 2 weeks out from the start of spring practice. We'll talk about it all on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. Intro.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You were locked on to the Texas Longhorns. I'm your host, BK Brad Kellner, Texas grad, Austin native, and longtime sports radio host in the Lone Star State. Thank you for making Locked On Longhorns your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Please like, please subscribe, and leave a comment and tell all of your Longhorn friends about Locked On, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week a little bit later in today's episode. On today's show, some highlights from Steve Sarkisian's first presser of the spring, including Sark's thoughts on Arch Manning's development as a leader and how Duane Akina has reacclimated himself with Texas football. And could the Texas women's basketball team's loss to South Carolina in the SEC Tournament Championship actually be a good thing for the Horns' chances in the NCAA tournament? That's all coming up. But first, the latest on the injury front from Steve Sarkisian, who held a local media availability yesterday, his first of the spring, as we sit exactly 2 weeks away from the first Texas spring football practice that will take place on March 25th. Sark talked about a number of different topics. He was with the media for about 40 minutes down on campus. One of the topics he addressed, the health of his roster. Here's what Sark had to say when asked for an injury update.
We'll have, I think it's like 4 or 5 guys who won't participate fully in spring. And like Derek Williams obviously won't be able to participate fully in spring coming off the knee injury. CJ Baxter won't be able to fully participate in spring. DeAndre Moore won't be able to fully participate in spring. I know those guys off the top of my head. I'm kicking this around. Colton Vosick won't be able to fully participate in spring. I think that's it. There may be one more. Now, we'll have some other guys that will be limited, especially early on in spring, but I think we'll grow into full participation. Like I've been really encouraged by Christian Clark and where he's at in his rehab of how far along he is. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. And we have some other guys. You come out of a season, you play 16 games, you're going to have your beyond bumps and bruises. You're going to have guys that are going to have some cleanup type things surgery-wise. Well, they'll be a little bit limited early. They may do walkthroughs. They may do individual. They may do 7-on-7. They might not be quite ready for team periods, but hopefully by week 3, week 4, we get them there.
I need to create some sort of overlay or graphic so I don't just have to stare at me while Steve Sarkisian is talking. But there's the latest from Coach Sark, and he mentioned 5 players by name: CJ Baxter, Christian Clark, Derek Williams Jr., Colton Vosick, and DeAndre Moore. And we're going to start with him because that was the big surprise today. DeAndre Moore is dealing with an injury, and he apparently will not be a full participant in Texas spring practice. I saw on Texas Football report that it is a toe injury that lingered late into last season that DeAndre Moore is still dealing with early in 2025. Of course, DeAndre Moore is Texas's leading returning receiver. No Matthew Golden, no Isaiah Bond, no Silas Bolden, all of those guys off to the NFL. DeAndre Moore, the most productive wide receiver coming back to Texas at 39 catches, 456 yards, and 7 touchdowns in 2024. He had a very good chance to be the number 1 wide receiver, and maybe he still does have a very good chance to be the number 1 wide receiver. But this is a guy who was going to be a huge part of this Texas Longhorn offense. Him not being 100% for at least the start of spring ball, that is not ideal for a team that doesn't have a lot of returning production in that wide receiver room. I mean, it's really DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo. And I think this is an opportunity for Ryan Wingo to maybe showcase his stuff during spring ball and try to prove to the coaches that he can be the number 1 wide receiver, even though he's been on campus for 1 year less than DeAndre Moore has. Look, Ryan Wingo showed us a lot in his true freshman season, the former 5-star recruit out of the state of Missouri. He flashed a number of different times last season, despite being relatively low on the depth chart. I think we all expect him to have a bigger role in this offense this coming season. Now with DeAndre Moore, at least limited for some, if not all of spring ball, that opens the door for Ryan Wingo to maybe try his hand at the number one wide receiver role for this Texas football team. But really, it's those two guys. I mean, I'm excited about the freshmen coming in. You got a 5-star with Khalil Lockett. You've got Jamie French in there as well. I'm excited about some of the second-year players that the Longhorns have in that wide receiver room. And I've got a ton of confidence that Chris Jackson is going to develop all of those guys and turn them into great players. But I don't love hearing that 50% of basically the returning production you have at wide receiver is on the shelf going into spring ball. And it makes me wonder if the transfer portal could be an option for Texas. Obviously, the portal is closed right now, but once it opens up at the end of spring ball in April, could Texas be in the market for a transfer wide receiver? They got 3 of them last year. Matthew Golden worked out really well. You look at A.D. Mitchell 2 years ago. That worked out really well for Texas. So the Longhorns have had some success recruiting portal receivers. They didn't go after anybody in the early window. Do they go after somebody post-spring? I was curious about that even before Steve Sarkisian talked about DeAndre Moore yesterday. Now I'm very curious to see what happens there. So the portal opening up post-spring, it's going to be interesting to look at for a number of different positions on this Texas roster, but wide receiver, definitely one to look out for. So wishing all the best to DeAndre Moore. Hopefully he's able to come back and contribute at least a little bit during the spring. And look, better safe than sorry. We're talking about spring ball here. It's most important to have DeAndre Moore as close to 100% as possible by the time August 30th gets here and Texas is playing a real game against the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. God, that still hurts to say. So I get it. Err on the side of caution. But again, not a huge fan of hearing that about DeAndre Moore. We'll see how that wide receiver position plays out during spring ball, which once again begins 2 weeks from today. We got a little CJ Baxter update in there. We've got more sound from Steve Sarkisian here. He was asked a follow-up question about CJ Baxter, who, of course, is coming off the LCL and PCL tears that he suffered last fall right before the start of the season. Here's the latest on CJ Baxter from Coach Sark.
Here's a guy that got injured in August and had surgery, a short time after that. The one thing we're learning about ACLs is that a guy can feel comfortable and look comfortable, but we've got to be mindful of the re-injury, which obviously we saw with Jonathan Brooks, unfortunately, with Carolina last season. We saw it with DeMarvion Overshone. So we got to be mindful. We got to watch guys as they go. Again, we're not in a rush. I'm not trying to roll the ball out there and make him carry the ball in spring ball. I've got all the way until when do we play? August 30th. So I don't know the exact date. What I know is he's on a really good progression. He's had no setbacks. He looks good. He's in really good spirits, and so that all those things are positives right now.
Yes, Coach, August 30th is your season opener in 2025, but love the end of that cut from Steve Sarkisian saying there's no setbacks, everything's positive, everything is going in the right direction, and same situation for DeAndre Moore. You want to err on the side of caution with CJ Baxter, who could be one of the most important players for this Texas team this coming season. I am fascinated to see the running back competition. Now, doesn't sound like we're going to see a lot of CJ Baxter in the spring, but when we get to fall camp, can CJ Baxter overtake Quintravion Wisner on the depth chart? Quintravion Wisner coming off a 1,000-yard season. He was huge for Texas, especially down the stretch. The former 3-star recruit. Nobody thought too much about him coming out of high school. All of a sudden, the 2 injuries Texas suffers in the running back room last fall elevates Quintravion Wisner on the depth chart, and he played a huge role in the success of the 2024 Texas Longhorns. He's the incumbent. You got to think he's the favorite, but we all know CJ Baxter was the number one running back recruit in America the same year. Quintravion Wisner was just a 3-star coming out of DeSoto. CJ Baxter started as a true freshman ahead of Jonathan Brooks back in 2023. Coaches may have got that decision wrong, but that shows you what Steve Sarkisian and this Longhorn coaching staff thinks about CJ Baxter. So even though he's coming off an injury and didn't play at all this past season, and Trey Wisner went for 1,000 plus, does CJ Baxter have a chance to win that starting job in the fall? It helps Trey Wisner's case that he's going to get to play in the spring and CJ Baxter won't. But that's an interesting position battle to watch over these next few months, especially considering the fact that Texas has itself a new running backs coach with Chad Scott. So maybe Tashard Choice, liked one guy more than the other. Now it's Chad Scott in here coaching up the Texas running backs. Usually it's the position coach that decides who plays on the field when we get to Saturdays in the fall. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. Obviously, Jaden Blue is off to the NFL. Of course, Jared Gibson is back. Christian Clark, you heard from Steve Sarkisian earlier that Sark is encouraged by where Christian Clark is at, and actually surprised was the word he used when talking about Clark's rehab from that torn Achilles. 2 early enrollee freshmen coming in. I mean, that running back room is loaded. It's one of the deepest in the country, if not the deepest in the country. You've got some talent there at the top. But again, we will see what happens. But love hearing that, CJ Baxter is on the right track coming back from his injury. And quick note on Derek Williams Jr. We'll see what happens there. Obviously suffered a season-ending injury in the month of October. Still getting back from that. Colton Vasek had shoulder surgery in the offseason. Would love to see what he can bring to the Texas edge room, which is already stacked with talent, with Colin Simmons, the reigning Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year, Ethan Burke, Trey Moore, obviously announcing he was coming back for one more season. You throw Colton Vasek in there, that group, speaking of deepest and best in the country, that's what the Texas edge room can be in 2025. Hopefully Colton Vasek is good to go. Hopefully all of those guys are ready to rock when we get to the fall. But again, opportunities knocking for a guy like Ryan Wingo. There's a chance for Quintravion Wisner to prove that he is by far and away the best running back for this Texas football team. There's maybe a chance for some of the younger safeties who were behind Derek Williams Jr. on the depth chart last year to play a bigger role for this Texas team that obviously lost a couple of pieces from the 24 secondary. There's opportunities for some of these other guys and some of these younger guys in spring football to showcase their stuff to Steve Sarkisian, Pete Kwiatkowski, and this entire coaching staff. So there is the latest from Steve Sarkisian on the injury front. We've got more from Coach Sark in a moment, including how Arch Manning is maturing as a leader for this Texas football team, and also how the defensive backfield is taking to new and old secondary coach Duane Akina. That's all coming up next right here on Locked on Longhorns. But first, a word from our friends at Nissan. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. And this week's Armada and clear-cut team of the week, the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's team, led by National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC, going 19-1 in conference play. The Blue Devils were plus 434 in ACC games. That's the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953 and 54. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done this past week. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And I drive a Nissan. I'm a big fan of Nissan. I could speak to the greatness that Nissan is all about. NissanUSA.com for more. Welcome back to Locked on Longhorns, your team every single day. More sound from Steve Sarkisian's first press conference of the spring. How about a word on Arch Manning? Somebody had to ask Sark an Arch question. We got one yesterday. Steve Sarkisian was asked about Arch Manning coming into his own as the starting quarterback for Texas. Of course, this will be his third year as a Longhorn, but Arch will be a starter for the first time in 2025. Steve Sarkisian was asked about Arch's growth and maturity as a leader.
I just continue to see a guy who has taken it and is trying to really go for it, that he just doesn't want to leave any stone unturned. He's working at his craft. He's working so hard in the off-season conditioning runs. He's now setting up those voluntary throwing sessions with the receivers during the week or on a weekend. He's breaking the team down. All those natural things that a quarterback has to do to instill belief in his teammates, to instill belief in the staff. He's doing it, and I think, but more importantly for him, which I love, he's having fun doing it. And it doesn't feel like he's working this. He's playing the game of football. He's being a great teammate. There's going to be bumps in the road. That's part of it. I'd love for him to go out and throw, a touchdown every pass that he throws. That's not a reality. And he's going to hear the murmurs of the crowd. And that's part of it too. That's part of playing this position. But in the end, I think he's enjoying the process of it, and he loves his teammates. And so I'm really proud of him up to this point. We got a long way to go still.
Yeah, Steve Sarkisian also said a little bit earlier in yesterday's presser, quote, "From the day he arrived, there's been a real sense of humility about him," end quote. And Sark has talked about that a couple of different times over the last couple of months. Arch Manning doesn't act like he comes from the first family of football. He doesn't have that sense of entitlement that, because my uncles are who they are, my grandpa is who he is, and my dad is who he is, that I deserve to get more than everybody else on this roster. I think that's obvious with the fact that Arch Manning didn't accept a single NIL deal until he became the starting quarterback at the University of Texas. That guy could have made himself millions of dollars as a backup in each of the last 2 seasons. Said, no, it's not about me. I'm not playing for the name on the back of the jersey. I'm playing for the name on the front. He's been a total team guy, even coming off the bench. And yeah, that doesn't sound like that has changed at all, even though Arch Manning is now elevated to QB1 with Quinn Ewers departing for the National Football League. That's something that I think Arch Manning has. And I think he's got a little bit more of that than even Quinn Ewers had. Just that natural leadership, that commanding presence. Like Quinn Ewers, it's not to say he was a bad leader. He wasn't, but he wasn't this rah-rah guy. He wasn't the loudest guy in the locker room. That's just not his personality. That's okay. There are plenty of great quarterbacks in the history of this sport that were not the loudest person in the locker room, that were not that super cheerful, in-your-face type of leader. Arch Manning is more of that naturally. I don't think it's fake. I don't think it's forced. You heard Steve Sarkisian reference that there. That's just more of his personality compared to Quinn Ewers. And I think that's why his teammates are going to rally around him throughout the course of this year, hopefully for the next couple of years while Arch Manning is the starting quarterback here in Austin, Texas. Obviously, the skill set is what it is, but it takes a mature kid. It takes a leader, and it takes a lot for somebody to deal with what Arch Manning is about to deal with, right? I mean, being the starting quarterback at the University of Texas is always a big deal. Heavy is the head that wears the horn. When you're QB1 at a blue blood program, there's all sorts of pressure because the microscope is on you all of the time. You couple that with the fact that your last name is Manning and you're next of kin in the first family of football. You've got 2 uncles who are Hall of Famers and a grandpa who's a Hall of Famer. Like, the amount of pressure that's going to be on Arch Manning is through the roof. I mean, we've already seen it as a backup these last 2 seasons. It's about to be crazy for him. There aren't a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who could handle all of that. To this point in Arch Manning's life, he has handled everything incredibly well. And I think that garners a lot of respect from the coaches and the players inside that locker room, that Arch Manning has just put his head down. He doesn't want to be one of one. He wants to be one of 85. He wants to do what everybody else does. And he probably realizes that, yeah, there's some people out there who think he's entitled. He's got to prove that, no, he's going to put his head down and go to work and show you why he has earned the opportunity to be the starting quarterback at Texas, why he earned all of the hype coming out of high school, why he's earning these Heisman odds. He's one of the favorites to win the Heisman Trophy, even though he's only started a couple of games in his college career. He's out to prove that, and I think he will. And Steve Sarkisian continues to talk about, again, the personality traits of Arch Manning being a big, big positive. One more from Steve Sarkisian's media availability yesterday about Duane Akina, the architect of DBU, of course, back for his second stint in Austin. He bounced around a little bit after leaving following the 2013 season, but Duane Akina is back to coach the Longhorn secondary. Steve Sarkisian was asked about the early impact Coach Akina has had since
I
returning.
think it's been a great start. I think, he demands instant respect, and not intentionally. It's just his demeanor and the way he goes about it. And I think there's been great rapport between Coach Akina and PK, and Coach Akina and obviously Johnny Nansen, and that those three guys I think have really working well together early on. I think the players have responded really well, and part of that, yeah, Michael Huff has helped, but I think all those ex-players have helped, whether it's been Aaron Ross, Griff. There's been so many of them. Quandre Diggs is here almost every day now. And so when the players hear an ex-player who's had success in college and in the NFL talk about a certain coach a certain way, they know right away, like, okay, this guy means business, but he's going to help me become the player that I want to become on and off the field. And so it's been a good transition so far.
I'm so excited about Coach Akina being back. And, just look at his track record. Look at his resume, what he did at Texas for more than a decade, what he's done as a secondary coach in college football over the years. His resume is second to none. And what a great opportunity it is for a guy like Manny Muhammad, a guy like Jalen Gilbo, a guy like Kobe Black, Jelani McDonald, Derek Williams. Go down the list of Texas secondary players who are all looking to be the next Michael Huff, the next Quandre Diggs, the next Aaron Ross, both at Texas and in the league. What a great guy to learn from. And the fact that, a bunch of those lifetime Longhorns who were coached by Duane Akina in college are coming back and saying, no, this guy, look what he did for me. If you just listen to him, do what he says, he can do the same thing for you. I'm so excited about him being back. And, he's got a commanding presence. Again, the skins on the wall speak for itself, but to have all of those former players going to bat for Duane Akina, that's huge. Loved that hire from Steve Sarkisian. And I love the combination of the old and the new, right? Mark Orfe comes in to coach the corners here at Texas. And you've got Duane Akina, the older guy who's been there, done that, coming in to coach the entire secondary. I like that. I think the hire of Duane Akina is going to help Mark Orfe's coaching career as well. But that's going to be a fun tandem back there in the Texas defensive backfield. And I'm not worried about Duane Akina in terms of recruiting. I don't want to turn this into a total Duane Akina segment. But again, that guy can walk into a house and say, yeah, I coached 3 Thorpe Award winners. Yeah, I coached 20 draft picks. I had 6 first-round picks during my time at Texas. I can do the same for you. Or if he's talking to a mom, I could do the same for your son. I'm pumped about Duane Akina being back here in Austin, and it sounds like things are going really, really well early on for him back on the 40 acres. All right, comment below with your thoughts. There's some sound from Steve Sarkisian yesterday. We might have a little bit more during tomorrow's program as well, but we'll shift gears here. The Texas women's basketball team came up just short in the SEC tournament championship game against South Carolina. I'm going to tell you why that might not be a bad thing, plus a quick preview of Texas baseball's midweek matchup against UT Arlington coming up at the Dish tonight. That's all right here on Locked On Longhorns. Hey, Locked On Longhorns fans, got some good news for you here. You ever wish that you could directly support your favorite Longhorn athletes and be a part of their journey? Now you can with Roy, the NIL app that puts you in control. Before Roy, NIL deals were often handled behind closed doors, and fans like you didn't have a clear way to support the players that you love. Now with Roy, you can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing the University of Texas. Here's the cool part. With Roy, you get to choose the player that you want to support. You get to decide how much you want to contribute. And on top of that, you get exclusive content straight from the athletes that you back. And the best part, if your player transfers, knock on wood, they don't, you get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. This is such a great invention. Kind of wish I had thought of this one first. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Longhorn sports. Download the Roy app from the App Store today and start backing Texas athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and real impact. The future of college sports is here. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right, welcome back to Locked On Longhorns, your team every day. Quick thought on the Texas women's basketball team before we wrap things up. Good run for the Longhorns in the SEC Conference Tournament. They knocked off Ole Miss in the quarterfinal on Friday. They took down Kim Mulkey and LSU in the semifinal on Saturday. Made it to the conference championship, but unfortunately that run came to an end in that conference championship game. A 64-45 loss to South Carolina in Greenville. Look, the Horns didn't play well. You give South Carolina credit. They're the defending national champions for a reason. Dawn Staley is a future Hall of Fame coach for a reason. That team is loaded. They're probably going to be the number one overall seed when the bracket comes out on Selection Sunday. That team has talent. That team has depth. They've got great coaching. They're going to be a tough out. But we're not talking about them. We're talking about Texas here. Losing that game might not be the worst thing in the world for Texas, because the last time the Longhorns lost a game was against South Carolina. After that, the Horns went on a 15-game winning streak that included a win over that same South Carolina team here in Austin. Some more good news. The Horns don't need to win 15 games to win a national championship. They only need to win 6. 6 more wins for Vic Schaefer and company this year, and Texas will be cutting down the nets as your women's basketball national champ. So whatever Vic Schaefer said and did, and whatever Maddie Booker and Taylor Jones and Kyla Oldacre and Rory Harmon and the rest of the squad did after that first loss to South Carolina, they need to do the exact same thing, because it worked the first time around. The Longhorns won 15 straight games, all in the SEC. That's why they split the conference championship in the regular season with South Carolina. If they got that same mentality, they could be in for a deep tournament run. Maybe that was the wake-up call that they needed. I'm excited to see what the Longhorns can do. I'm excited to see their draw on Selection Sunday. I think Texas will be a 1 seed. They did drop from number 1 to number 5 in this week's AP poll, but Charlie Cream, who is the lead bracketologist for women's basketball for ESPN, still has Texas as a 1 seed. I think he has the Longhorns as his 3rd 1 seed, but it's Texas, it's UConn, and it's USC, I think, fighting for 2 number 1 seeds. I feel like South Carolina and UCLA are locks to be number 1s. Texas hoping to get one of those other number 1s. If not, they will be the number 1, number 2 seed. It's a lot of math, a lot of numbers there. Sorry to hit you with all of that. But again, Texas basketball, the women's team, they bounced back after their last loss to South Carolina. I feel like they can do the same thing this time around, and hopefully Vic Schaefer can get to his first Final Four as the coach at Texas. Got there twice at Mississippi State, has been to 3 Elite Eights here in Austin, has yet to get over the hump to the Final Four. I feel like this year's team has a chance. And a quick thought on Texas baseball. The Longhorns back in action, trying to make it 14 straight wins. Texas taking on UT Arlington tonight. The Mavericks, no, not those Mavericks. UT Arlington Mavericks, 4-8 on the season. I assume it'll be Jason Flores on the bump for Jim Schlossnagel's crew. Hopefully he can have another good start. Hopefully the offense stays hot. And hopefully the Longhorns get another win as they get set for SEC play this weekend at Mississippi State. Texas up to 11 in the latest D1 baseball poll. We'll talk more about Texas baseball later in the week. And obviously we will recap the game on tomorrow's show. But that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for making Locked On Longhorns your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here. It's conference tournament week, baby. So be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And speaking of college basketball, yeah, we will be previewing Texas and Vanderbilt and the entire SEC basketball tournament on tomorrow's program. So make sure you are locked in to Locked On Longhorns. Really appreciate y'all listening. Thanks again to Nissan for sponsoring today's show. I will talk to y'all tomorrow. Until then, horns up, mics off. I'll see y'all next time on Locked On Longhorns.